Okay, good morning, everybody. I have to repeat this several times, huh? Are you excited? Like Eid holiday is imminent? Huh? Have you plans for the holiday? Because usually we do not plan. And because we do not plan, we feel very sorry because we have not made use of time. So I strongly recommend that you try to plan your time. It's a long vacation. I think, you have, first of all, you have to enjoy yourself at the Eid. Do not busy yourself doing things, reading during the Eid because of the midterm exam. I strongly recommend that you enjoy yourself. However, after Eid, you have to plan and to work very hard. Anyway, today we are going to see, it is an introductory lecture to metaphysical poetry, because today we're not studying John Donne. So it's going to be a little bit historical background, social background, and perhaps general characteristics of the metaphysical poetry. But before we start this, as usual, I need a report. You read last time, I think. So we need, yes, the lady there. Okay, you just come here.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Daily report. Actually, this week I suffered a lot, and till this moment I feel confused and stressed because of my crowded schedule of the unfinished exams. So my psychological condition is too bad because of these exams and the crowded schedule of study works. Believe me or not, before 2 days I began to weep and my tears began to fall down continuously, and I began to seem like a mad person because of these bad conditions. Coming back to the poetry class, actually, although yesterday I was busy in studying because of the today's exam, and I was pressured and confused. I felt these issues. I left all these issues and decided to think about what is suitable for the report of the previous lecture. Consequently, I remembered the lecture with some happiness. As usual, it began by saying the daily report, and after that, the teacher gave us an obvious explanation about the two poems of Shakespeare, and he ordered us to compare between them after giving us the aesthetic elements in both poems.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's good you have the report as a vent out. I know a lot of the students are pressured because of the midterm exam, but you should know that the midterm exams are given under the pressure of classes and lectures. So those who do not come to class because of a midterm, for me, it's cheating, It's not honestly, because, we know that we want to test you. When you are having a lot of lectures, classes, how you function. You function well or you need time. If you are a good time manager, you don't have a problem. But if you are not, you'll be in trouble. Okay, I need another report, another creative report. Creative? Let's see. Okay. But people will envy you because you have read several times. Okay, go ahead.
Shakespeare's words, of which he's so proud, whistled through my head like rough wind so loud. He was right, though, 5 decades on, and his words still flow. Through paper and pen the words remain so, and in poetry class his immortality does show. And I, for one, I am one to know.
Wow, thank you very much. Clap for her. So this is yes, it's very creative. Good. I know a lot of you wrote even more creative reports. But if anybody is dying like to read, I don't mind. If she feels she has a wonderful report, I don't mind. She can read. Okay, so metaphysical poetry. What have you prepared for us? It's a good question. What have you prepared for us? Don't tell me fish and chips. This has nothing to do with metaphysical poetry. I'll be telling you the joke of fish and chips later. Okay, metaphysical poetry, I don't know. The term itself seems to be tough. Metaphysical. What is physical to say metaphysical? Okay? The metaphysicals, even like Amal say the metaphysicals, She's complicating it more and more. Yes. What do you want to tell me? Like, speak. Metaphysical poets? Yes. I'm ready to listen. Yes, please.
I think that metaphysical poetry. You said things that are beyond the nature.
Yeah, so you are just like looking at metaphysical, something beyond the physical. Yes, they were concerned with highly philosophical issues. Man's relation with God, man's experience in life, man's, relation with death, love, which is a general, issue, love to God, love to human beings. Yes. Yes.
I think the time in which the metaphysicals started their poetry. First of all, I want to say that at the time it wasn't really very spread and it wasn't very much read. And it later became very prominent and analyzed. But at the time, it was the time of there were a lot of religious beliefs, and there were the Puritans.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes. The metaphysical poets were elitist. Yes. They were not writing for, they were not like Shakespeare, Spencer, and others. They were not writing for the common people. They were elitist. They were highly educated. And, they were a little bit chauvinistic because they wanted to show that they were, very good. So their poetry was inaccessible for lay people, for ordinary people. Their poetry was very difficult. They used their wit, their mind, their intellect to write poetry. That's why they were not popular. And you know what? It is only just in 20th century, it was T.S. Eliot who brought them to surface, because Samuel Johnson was the critic, who was first called them the metaphysical poets. But you mentioned the religious, because it's very important, to talk about the religious background. In 1603, Elizabeth died, and James the first king from the Stewart family, because Elizabeth was Tudor, so we're talking about dynasty, it's a different dynasty. James Stewart the first, who was of Scottish origin, if you remember when when Shakespeare wrote Macbeth, he was complimenting him, he was flattering him, like he was a descendant of, the Scottish, of Banco, if you remember. This king was religious, and he was accredited for translating the Bible, the authorized version of the Bible. So during his time, the Bible was widely read, because before he translated it from Latin into English, few people, the Bible was limited to few people. But when it became translated in English, so a lot of people started reading the Bible. And when you see a lot of people start to read, it means they become very religious, and the arguments, the controversy, start. And this is what happened, in 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 that century. So the religious tension began to increase, mainly between the Catholic and the Protestant. And even in 1605, there was the Catholic were tried to blow up the parliament and kill the king. It was called the gunpowder plot. The gunpowder, which was referred in Macbeth, but James was very tough with them, and he put a lot of them in prison. The Catholic were not treated very well. They did not have their rights, or they did not have their rights in employment, and their social rights. They were denied their social rights because of their creed. This is one thing. Another thing, on the other side, the Protestant themselves had some argument among themselves, and the Protestant, some of them were very radical, very extremist, called the Puritans. Those Puritans wanted the king to change more. They wanted to press him to change more, to clean the English church out of the Catholic churches. So they were pulling to the extreme, and the king wanted to be in the middle. What happened, as a result, he kicked them out, about 3,000 of them. They were deported to Holland, it was in 1620, something like this, 18, 19. They were deported to Holland, and after 1 year they started their journey to America, and they settled in Massachusetts, mainly in Jamestown. And this is how, of course, America was explored before that. America after Marlowe, and when Marlowe was writing Come Love With Me, when Spencer was writing, America was already discovered, and the literature of that time was promoting people to go to America. So here we have the first American settlement, or the first English settlement, which was started by the British themselves on the East Coast, the Northeast Coast in Massachusetts, a settlement called Jamestown settlement. So that was the atmosphere. This atmosphere continued to be complicated more and more, until England became, in 1942, in a state of civil war. There was a civil war. This civil war continued until 1651. What happened? Because in, I think, in 1635, King James died, and, Charles I, his son, took, over. He was a weak king, and during his time, the civil war broke out. This is a bit history. It helps us in having a good background to study the metaphysical poetry. There was a civil war. Of course, the civil war was very bitter. A lot of people died. A lot of people were imprisoned for their faith. So it was an age of certainty. This 17th century, it was an urge of, change. And what happened in 1651, the king was executed, similar to Gaddafi, he was executed, and England was, declared as a republic for the first time in its history. It was a republic in 1651, and this continued to 1661. England was governed by the parliamentarians, who were very tough. Their leader was Cromwell. Those are similar to those people who went to America. They were hardliners people, very extremist. And, Who was, do you think, the assistant of Cromwell? Yeah, the assistant. The Latin assistant of Cromwell was John Milton, the famous English poet, who was a poet and a legislator. Of course, like they continued governing England. He was like the media, or you could say the spokesman of the whole ideology. He, made many legislation in marriage and in divorce law, you see. So he was very active. But in 1661, like the parliament again voted, and like they restored the king from France. And, Charles II, and this is what we call the Restoration period. So from 1661 onward, this is what is called in English history the Restoration period. The Restoration period, the Augustan age, the Age of Reason, like all these names were applying to that. And, the Neoclassical age. It was an age in which like emotion, sentiments, feelings, poetry, were dismissed. They didn't appreciate poetry, they didn't appreciate imagination, they didn't appreciate this. So poetry had to meet certain rules and regulations. It was not like Shakespeare, festive, lyrical. So poetry was didactic. Poetry was satirical. And the famous poets of, that time, were, Alexander Pope and John Dryden. They are missing in our course, we're not teaching them, but we'll start from the pre-romantic, from, William Blake and the Romantics. So this is a bit of history, about the 17th century. Thank you for introducing this. So you could say it was an age of uncertainty. But we should know also, in spite of this, England was, progressing in the field of research, in the field of academia. Scientific. It was progressing, in chemistry, in physics, and there were many explorations. New continents were explored. So it was the age of exploration. It was the age of expansion. And it was the age of scientific progress. So everything was changing. So new theories, even new theories about the earth, about our reality changed. So those poets, the metaphysical poets were writing in an age which was characterized by a great deal of uncertainty. So all theories about the world being, like flat, have changed now, and everything, man's relation with God, has been reconsidered. So this is a bit of history. Let me listen to you. If you speak, tell me, I explain. This is me, So, what have you prepared for us? Yes?
The language of metaphysical is vulgar and argumentative.
Yes. So you are referring to the metaphysical poets. Yes. Now, we're dealing with a generation. Now, in fact, the 17th century was not the century of the metaphysical poets. We have three, groups of poets. We have, the metaphysical poets. We have the Cavalier poets, and we have the, followers of Ben Jonson. So we have the metaphysical who were writing in the fashion of John Donne. We have the Cavalier who were writing in the fashion of George Herbert, and we have the traditional one who were writing in the fashion of Ben Jonson. The most abstruse and difficult were the metaphysical poets. The Cavalier poets were little bit hedonistic, they were bohemian. They wanted to, their life was not a life of austerity. They wanted to enjoy their life. They wanted to enjoy their life before they die. So their philosophy of life depended on enjoying your life before you die. And that was called the theme of Carpe Diem. These terms, I'm going to write them for you, later, okay? But just I'm introducing them. Now, the metaphysical poets were poets who wrote in a different style. Yes, they were difficult because of their argument. What's wrong with their argument?
Because the theme are religious themes, so everyone wants to improve his beliefs on it.
Yes, so they were argumentative. I mean, they introduced an argument, a thesis, and they continued, elaborating it, arguing until they convince us about their point of view. So they were arguing. They were introducing arguing, and usually when they introduced the argument, it was very abrupt. So, for example, when John Donne started his poetry, he started in a very abrupt, like go and catch, the falling star, or like the sun rising. The opening of the sun rising is very, abrupt. The opening of valediction forbidding is very abrupt. Abrupt like sudden, yes. No, John Donne was a metaphysical poet. He was.
He was written a romantic poetry, and then he transferred it to.
No. We don't like. He was no. No romanticism. The issue of romanticism is a little bit different. Once we approach romanticism, we want to talk about it in a different way. Good. Yes. Their poetry was difficult. Their poetry was characterized by, by imagery, which was drawn from not the roses, not the summer, but it was drawn from chemistry, from, from physics, from astronomy, astrology. So yes, they were referring, the images were drawn from the emergent field of knowledge during that time.
There was a lot of strange conceits.
Yes. Okay, we'll talk about the conceit, the paradoxes, in a moment. Yes. Okay. Let's see. Now, I don't want to keep asking you. Let's see here. What do we have? As you say, metaphysical poetry. Amal started by, just arranging this. As you see here, we have strange, heterogeneous ideas. Like ideas which are heterogeneous, not homogeneous. And she's referring to man's relationship with God. So John Donne was talking to God as if he was talking to a person, you see. Surprising and unexpected beginning, like butter my heart, three-person God. A man is starting by, asking God to butter his heart, okay? Riddles, like their poetry is like riddles because, you have something like we are two but we are one. It's like a riddle. How come? You are, they invite you to think how, and in Andrew Marvell, look, Andrew Marvell, he says, at the end of his coy mistress, though we cannot stop our sun, but we can make it run. How can you can't stop the sun, but you can make it run. How? Can you tell me? Yeah? It's very strange, isn't it? It's like a riddle. It's like a riddle. How can't you make the sun? And this is a paradox, of course. Yeah, it is. Very perplexing. I don't know. Of course, the paradox is easy. But when it comes to the conceit, it is more abstruse. It's more complicated. And in a moment, I'll be talking about the conceit. Okay. So how come, you cannot make, you cannot stop your sun, but you can make it run? I'm telling you because In fact, to his coy mistress, which is very, vulgar, and you're not going to study it. At the end, he was like inviting, or he wanted to enjoy his life. So he was trying to persuade, a lady to enjoy his life, but she was, adamant. So in the poem, he said, we cannot stop. We don't have control over our life. We cannot stop, the sun, the time itself, because we cannot stop. We have no control, but we can make it run. By enjoying ourselves, we can make it run. See what I mean? So this is the paradox. Okay? By enjoying ourselves, we can make our sun run. All these are epithets which apply for, strange ideas, surprising or unexpected, unexpected beginning, of the poems. Poetry and verses, they don't have this smooth lyrical tone. Their poetry is harsh. It is harsh. It is very noisy, like what we are going to see in Butter My Heart. Blow, burn, boo, boo. It's like very, very noisy poetry. They are exaggerating. They are revolutionary, far-fetched. Far-fetched. It's the conceit itself. What is the conceit? The conceit is what? What is a conceit? Do you have an example of a conceit? The flea. Okay. I don't want to talk about the flea, but I want to give you an example of a conceit. A conceit is what? It is an analogy. Analogy. It is a strange analogy, or a strange simile, or a metaphor, in which the relationship between the vehicle and the tenor is very remote, is unexpected. You see what I mean? So, John Donne, in one of his poems called Valediction, Forbidding Morning, he compared himself and his wife to the two legs of a compass. And he said, what is a compass? The two legs of a compass, like here, it's like this. This is a compass. The two legs of a compass. And he said, if they are two, they be two. If they be two, they are two. Like twin compasses are two. Thy heart, the fixed soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth the other do. See what I mean? What he wants to say, you and I are like the two legs of a compass. This is very surprising. I think, the surprising thing, if you want to understand the poetry of John Donne, you have to have a calculator. You have to measure. Yes. That's why, John Dryden, a 17th and 18th century poet, said that John Donne should have been hanged. Why? Because he kept perplexing the mind of the fair sex, the ladies, by his witty and strange philosophical speculations, and by his conceits. Now let me in the poem, John Donne was elaborating, was explaining, and to explain in the metaphysical poetry when they wanted, because sometimes you want to convince the people about the appropriateness of this image, about the aptness of this image, so you have to keep persuading them. How come this? Once I told my wife, this is a personal, you are like the wall. She was upset with me. You are like this wall. But when I told her, no, you are like this wall fixed in my heart, she changed her mind, So this is what I mean by elaboration. Elaborate So at the beginning, it is very strange. But when you elaborate it, it becomes, easily accessible, and then, here, what happened to you when you laughed? There was a flash here. This is like what we call the flash of the conceit. Because the conceit depends on a witty use of language. And, a witty use of ideas. So, let's go to what's, the conceit in this one. He said, we are two. If there be two, they are two. Like twin compasses are two. So it is, now the conceit is originally either a metaphor or a simile, but it is, sustained. It is continued. It runs on the poem. He said, yes, we are two. If they want to think of us like two, we are two. Like twin compasses are two. Thy soul, thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no shoe. You are the fixed one. And I'm the one who moves. Like, look, this is like, women were not happy with this because a woman is always sitting at home and it is the man who was like going, roaming here, So you are the fixed foot and I'm the one who's roaming. But like he wanted to say, like, look, when I go here, you follow me. When I leave England, you keep thinking of me. So you are following me. You are the fixed one, but you always follow me. What he wants to say in this conceit, like, although we are physically two, but spiritually one. It is by the virtue of our love. Very strange. Very strange. So those poets were, perplexing the mind of other people. Look here, I like what T.S. Eliot wrote about this. It was, yes, Samuel Johnson who was first called them metaphysical poetry. And in fact, it was, he named them not out of veneration or respect, but out of irrespect. Sometimes when we don't respect people, we say, the this, the nasty, And like Samuel Johnson, used this, as a kind of irrespect. It was a disparaging, the metaphysical, the crazy people, So usually, like, they were termed like metaphysical. Why? Because they were, when they wanted to persuade you, they tried to yoke together. You know what I mean? Yoke, bring together two things which are not likely to be connected. And that was the cleverness. So they were yoking together heterogeneous ideas. Heterogeneous ideas. Like what Eliot said about, them. Eliot said that those poets were a generation more often named than read, and more often read than profitably studied. Like, they were neglected. He admired them because T.S. Eliot was a poet who evaluated poetry of ideas, poetry of strong ideas, of difficult ideas. And of course, he thought that the metaphysical poets were modern because of their conceits and paradoxes. So as you see here, the phrase metaphysical has long done duty as a term of abuse. They were abusing them. It was not a kind of respect. So they had their reputation, because their poetry was very strong. And even though critics continued criticizing them, they were very, strong. Here, this is the first characteristic, the wit or the conceit. What is the conceit here? It is a combination of dissimilar images or discovery of occult resemblance. Occult, like you see, it is very, not straightforward. It's the opposite. A resemblance in things apparently unlike. So, like in The Flea, which you gave an example, here we have a poem. This is The Flea. In fact, this poem seems to be, he talks about this, what is strange about John Donne. Like when he was talking about religion, he was talking about religion in terms of love. And when he was talking about love, he was talking about, love in terms of religion. So here, he was trying to persuade, a lady, and he said, you and I are like a flea, So you and I, we are 3 in 1. You and I, why? Because this flea sucked your blood, and it sucked my blood, so we are 3 in 1. But all of this, what he wanted to say, he wanted to express a very central Christian notion of the idea of a Trinity, God 3 in 1. So which, of course, as a Muslim, we don't buy this at all. So he was using this conceit, but he was using it in a very, vulgar manner, in a very, erotic. These are erotic images, So yes, one characteristic of the metaphysical poetry, they were using erotic images. Now this is Better My Heart, is the poem which we want to study. But of course, the list I have just given you is not complete, because there are more characteristics. So I prefer to read this poem and to consider more characteristics after Eid. But I want to read this poem aloud for you, and then you consider how you analyze this and how you prepare it and how you respond for it. Okay? Better my heart, 3-person God. For you, as yet but not, breathe, shine, and seek to mend, that I may rise and stand. Overthrow me and bend your force to break, glow, burn, and make me new. I, like an usurped town to another due, labor to admit you, but oh, to no end. Reason your viceroy in me should defend, but is captive and proves weak or untrue. Yet dearly I love you, and would be loved fain, but I'm betrothed into your enemy. Divorce me, untie, break that knot again. Take to me, imprison me, for I accept you. For I, except you enthrall me, never shall be free, nor ever chaste, except you ravish me. It could be read also in a different way. It could be read like this. Bear my heart, 3-person God, for you as yet but not breathe, shine and seek to mend, that I may rise. It could be sung like this. It's very noisy. It's like rap. Okay. Divorce me, untie or break that knot again. Take me to you, imprison me, for I accept you enthrall me, never shall be free, never chase except you ravish me. So read it, respond to it, and inshallah after Eid we are going to consider this, reconsider. We are going to reconsider. Thank you for listening. I wish you a happy Eid. I wish you enjoy your Eid. As I recommended, enjoy your Eid and then study hard. Thanks a lot.